boy. Give me a kiss. Oh, good kiss. Oh boy. Boy, oh boy.
Hello BookTube and welcome to Tropes in 19th Century Female Authors Bingo! Let me explain the game quite quickly here. We have 3 authors and their major works. We have Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. We have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and we have North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Now get your pieces ready and we'll see who gets to bingo. Quickly here we have the blue piece with Elizabeth Gaskell's face on there. We have the green piece with Jane Austen's face on there. And then we have the red piece with Charlotte Bronte. Our first square is the dark, mysterious male. Well, in Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, we have Darcy. Dark, mysterious, handsome. Oh wow, the ultimate man. But where else can we find him? Oh right, in North and South, we have Thornton. And let's not forget the enigmatic Rochester in Jane Eyre. We got 3 in 1 square. Let's see how much more can we go. Well, we have the trope of hate first and love later, wherein the main female heroine hates her first love interest, but eventually finds that they are in love with each other. Where do we have that? Of course, in Jane Austen, between our lovely characters there. And then in North and South, again, we see that our main character hates Mr. Thornton. Well, we don't have that in Charlotte Bronte quite yet, but let's move on to the next square. Misfortune happens to the main character. Something horrible happens in their childhood. Well, let's see, in North and South, she moves to the city. A tragedy for some, tragedy for others. Let's keep moving. And then we have, of course, Jane Eyre. Her mother dies and she is tortured by her cousins. Let's move on to the unwanted suitor. Who do we have here in Pride and Prejudice? Why, it's Mr. Collins. Nobody wants to marry that fool. North and South, why, yes, that's Mr. Henry Lennox. A sweet guy, but not for her. And lastly, of course, in Jane Eyre as well, she has her cousin coming after her. Nasty. Next square, we have our main heroine characters described as spirited young ladies, or they're different in some way. We call that the special snowflake. Jane Eyre, of course, in Pride and Prejudice. You don't get much more special and different than that, do you? And again, in North and South, man, she just doesn't know when to shake hands, does she? And of course, in Jane Eyre, she becomes more spirited after she admits her love, but still, she's still a young, spirited lady. Well, we can't have our main heroine without her foil character, her silly, ridiculous female friend. Let's see. In Jane Austen, well, there's Lydia, her younger sister. Quite a silly character. Then in North and South, of course, we have Edith. Oh, so annoying. Oh, sorry, wrong character. North and South, there we go. And, well, may as well set in Jane Eyre too. We have Georgiana Reed. Well, next they visit the city. Oh, where does that happen? Oh, it happens quite often in Pride and Prejudice. All these stories pretty much, take place in the country unless you're Anne Elizabeth Gaskell's, in which case you move permanently to the city, but you still go to London quite often. The city is London. And let's see, that happens in Charlotte Bronte too. Of course it does, after she runs away from Mr. Rochester. Now it's hard to see here because our squares are covered, but it says a social event with unlikable characters. While this happens, it's either a ball or a dinner. Let's see, Jane Austen, how many times do they go to balls in Pride and Prejudice? Oh, I got sick about reading about those stupid balls. Okay, let's see, North and South. Well, we do have that dinner with Mrs. Thornton that she really doesn't like, along with some other characters. And let's not forget in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, she's often forced to socialize with Mr. Rochester's friends. Well, let's not get too excited yet. We have a lot of our squares covered. Nervous mother. Well, I mean, she's pretty much confirmed in Pride and Prejudice, but it also happens in North and South. I mean, her mother dies. Sorry, spoiler alert. Her mother dies from her nervous condition. We don't really know Jane Eyre's mother, so we can't say she's nervous. We'll leave that one blank. Well, what happens in all of these novels? They end up marrying a rich character. We have Darcy, we have Thornton, and we have Mr. Rochester. Boom, bada boom. Now what happens when you have a rich husband? You get the rich old snobby people. And in Jane Austen we have Darcy's aunt. Can't remember her name, but there we go. I remember her being that way. De Bourgh. That was her name. In Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, we have Mrs. Reed, and we can't forget that Mrs. Thornton and Elizabeth Gaskell. Man, is she nasty. Then, it wouldn't be a love story without the competition. The original love triangles happened in 19th century female authors' novels. So, who do we have in Jane Eyre? We have that Blanche Ingram character. Who is she? Wow. And of course we cannot forget Miss Bingley in Pride and Prejudice. She could also go on rich snobby, but she's not that old, so we'll just stick her in competition. Now there's the unexpected inheritance, the deus ex machina of a random dead person dying, the rich uncle we all hope and dream of. Well, it actually happens in North and South, with Mr. Bell giving his inheritance to the heroine. And let's not forget in Jane Eyre, from John. Oh, got that stuck there. So they both become rich, and then can soothe their conscience into enriching their even richer husbands. Then we have the manor. Notice the quotation marks. The big house that the characters tend to fall in love with. Of course, we can't forget Pemberley, the iconic manor of Mr. Darcy. And then again, in North and South, I mean, it's just a Marlborough Mills, but the Thornton house is quite nice. And of course, you couldn't have Jane Eyre with Thornfield Hall. Now, one good thing about these books is that they address the class relations of their time, often between the rich old snobby person and their main character, who tends to be poor. Well, let's see where we have that in our authors here. In Pride and Prejudice, we learn about the middle class. In Jane Eyre, we have the difference between the governess and the master. And in Elizabeth Gaskell, I mean, that novel is rife with class interactions. And lastly, these books would not be as popular if it wasn't for the epiphany of love. So first they are indifferent or they hate the hero, and then they have this epiphany sometime where they realize, oh, I was in love with him the whole time. Oh, isn't it wonderful? And yes, that's in Pride and Prejudice, that is in Jane Eyre, and oh, looky-do, North and South at the same time. There we go! Bingo! Hey, you might want to check out Pickle's Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and other social media links in the description bar underneath.